So even something as creative as producing a song, which, don't get me wrong, takes tons of skill, and I could never do it for at least unless I put a ton of effort into it. That still isn't necessarily safe from AI. And that's usually the argument that I hear is like, oh, well, as long as you're doing something creative, then AI can't touch it. Well, yeah, not really.
Interesting.
So
that's a whole realm that I haven't really given much consideration to. Although I've heard the argument for like AI creating music. I've seen I don't know if it was a YouTube video or something like that was talking about it. It doesn't seem too outlandish when you explain it in that respect. When you explain the way AI works, it definitely doesn't sound like something that's very out of reach or outlandish at all.
Right. So the way AI works, since you mentioned that, so most quality AI, like Tesla's automated driving software, is the use of neural nets. So neural net is best replicated by our brain, because our brain is comprised of a bunch of neurons, net of neurons. And so when you create a neural net in a computer, you're basically replicating that process. So it's a bunch of neurons that fire together. And what you do is you input a piece of information, and then you get an output of the information. Whether it's the same information, whether it's changed, doesn't matter at that instant. Then you say, so let's say we're trying to teach a computer to recognize what a cat looks like. So you input hundreds of cats into this computer, and then they output hundreds of cats. And slowly you give the computer a goal of, I need you, when you see this image, to say this is a cat. And so you input hundreds of cats, you input hundreds of cats, and then you input a dog in there. And then it's going to say, okay, well, here were the differences between the dog and the hundreds of cats that I've seen. And then you input more dogs and more cats and so forth. And then eventually it comes up with a set of parameters around what it knows to be a cat and what it knows to be a dog. And then eventually you give it an actual picture, or you let it take a brand new picture of a dog or a brand new picture of a cat. And then it says, this is a cat or this is a dog. And you basically say if that's correct or if that's incorrect. And then it adjusts its algorithm based accordingly.
It's like very similar to classical conditioning theories.
100%. Yeah. And so exactly how our brain works. It's like a neural net. So our brain basically says, here are, if I'm driving down the street and I don't know what a pothole looks like before I've gone over one, and I hit that pothole and my car jolts and it gives me a bit of a shock, I know that wasn't a pleasant experience. In the future, when I see something that looks like a pothole, I'm going to avoid it. Right. So similar, it's similar to when AI works, at least in its current form, especially when using neural nets. So if I were to input hundreds of different songs and then it exported a song, and I could basically definitively say that song is good or that song is bad, or that song, if I were to give it a probably better scale, is that song's 88 out of 100 and it needs to be 100 before we would be willing to release it. It could then change a whole bunch of different things. We input more songs, exports another song, we improve
just continually changing those different variables until it finds the right.